Welcome, friend. I am Dr. Grant Wiedenfeld, and I am in the weeds trying to understand Judaka's article, The Drawback of the Ziejin's Model, Okay, I'm going to give some background and then look at the article, which is very short, and finally a clip from one of Ziejin's films. So this was an article that appeared in the Shanghai state-run newspaper in 1986. There's also a Hong Kong edition of the newspaper, and it might have come out in that one too. And so it's the state newspaper. This means it's not just, oh, who cares what this critic thinks? It's, people in the government are supporting this critic, and what he does is it's a takedown of this filmmaker Ziejin. So that's a big deal anywhere that has a state newspaper that comes out criticizing one of its artists. That means there's a problem. So Judaka is a critic. I think the 1986 article was his breakout. He's written several books of criticism about all kinds of culture, not just film. They talked to him. NPR foreign correspondents have talked to him a number of times. I found this photo from an NPR story, and so he's a smart guy, studied in Australia as well. He would have been a younger man in 1986, criticizing a director who was older, who died in 2008, and who was very successful at the time. Here's some posters from his films. Maybe he's the Steven Spielberg of China at this point. Popular successes, The Legend of Tianjin Mountain, 1980, Judaka mentions. The Herdsman, 1982. Hibiscus Town, which I think comes out after the article. This is what I'm going to have a clip from. But in that film, Legend of Tianjin Mountain, there is the bad guys are the radical left communists from the Cultural Revolution era. So it's one thing to be against that era, which China has moved on from in the 70s and 80s. But if he's being criticized in this state newspaper, there's this sense that he's gone too far. He is gone too far to the right. His movies are too conservative. So that's the theme that's going to pop up. And in fact, the final line from the article is that Ziejin's movies are not in the spirit of the May 4th movement. So what that was maybe the key incident in a general new culture movement, broader movement of reform, revolution, modernizing, turning against traditional culture, which was represented by Confucius, and traditional government, which is kind of monarchy, empire. We're turning against that. We're for democracy and a new world of freedom. So some of these pictures. This is from it was May the 4th in 1919 when 3,000 or so students in Beijing were protesting the Treaty of Versailles, signed in Paris at the end of World War I. And the thing that really ticked them off was that there were lands on the eastern coast that Germany had laid claim to before that were now given to Japan. Today they are a part of mainland China. So there's this national sentiment that uh, the and anti-imperialist sentiment that, oh, the Europeans have given away these lands that should be part of China to Japan. So that was one thing, but apparently the real significant aspect of this movement was in the picture on the bottom right there, from Shanghai a couple weeks later, May 26th, there was a general strike. So it isn't just students, it's workers in factories, teachers, all workers go out on strike. And so there's a big uprising um, here, part of a series of uprisings and reform movements that are happening at this time. It's leading to the foundation of the Communist Party in 1921, which is maybe why would mark the end of the New Culture movement, and a different movement that leads to a civil war. So, among the proponents of democracy, there's a split. There are factions. There's a more moderate or more right-wing faction, and I hate to call either of them moderate, because in the Civil War things got ugly. And so older was the Republic of China, KMT Party, also known as the Nationalist Party, eventually led by General Chiang Kai-shek, who you see there. And as you can imagine, less of a break from that imperial tradition. Look at the way he's dressed in this poster. Now there's a break in the Civil War when Japan invades in 1937, but it picks back up again after the end of World War II. You see Mao Zedong on the right is much more of the working man here. Doesn't look like a noble, and he is eventually the general and leader of the People's Republic of China, the Chinese Communist Party. And the Civil War is effectively ends in 1945, but they never sign a peace treaty. And even today, there's ongoing tension between PRC and Taiwan, because the nationalists, they went to Taiwan and set up their government there, and both claim to be the true China. Hong Kong is another semi-independent, or was more so. So sometimes there's talked about three Chinas, different people who have different claims for China. So these tensions are ongoing and would have been ongoing in the 80s. Now, last aspect of background here is this was a slide that I talked about in the background to the Confucius reading, is that, okay, in the May 4th movement, they're turning against tradition. They were turning against Confucius. Confucius is in a way, a symbol of tradition we've seen since the Han Dynasty. His works became, kind of the main figure of tradition. In the 70s, this is right before Mao Zedong died in 76. There was a campaign against Confucius and associating him with Lin Bao, who was enemy at the time, had once been the successor of Mao Zedong, but then attempted coup, perhaps. He became the enemy. So, where are we at in 1986 here? Well, they'd moved beyond the Cultural Revolution and that decade that ended with Mao, which was a decade of purges of political enemies, of violence. Things had settled. A little more liberal or capitalist kind of turned to in the 1980s, but we're not yet at the 1990s, where there's a return to patriotism and tradition in so not embracing Confucius, but a return to those traditions and an interest in the American dream as a kind of model that could be adapted for China. We're not there yet in 1986. There's still, there still seems to be, the anti-tradition left is a little bit louder, or it is at this moment. You can see the tension between them in this piece of criticism. Okay, so now let's get into Daka's article, The Drawback of Jiejin's Model. Jiejin's model of filmmaking. What is it? What's the problem with it? In a word, it's a Hollywood style, is what Daka says. This great Chinese, real popular filmmaker, he's making Hollywood style movies. What does that mean? What qualities does he consider Hollywood style? Tearing at the heartstrings of the audience, the power of the aforementioned morality always guarantees a happy ending in which good triumphs over evil. So the happy ending, the sense of pleasing, at the end, people are not supposed to worry about social problems. It's that everything in the world is okay, all is well, and the movie experience has a very clear message of who the good guys are, who the bad guys are, not a lot of moral ambiguity. I love this description. A magnificent moral fairy tale in which all social contradictions are resolved. Everything is hunky-dory. Looking further down, okay, this is the paragraph where he draws some specific connections to Hollywood and the Shanghai Film Studio, which had started making movies before the Communist Party took over. So, well, in Shanghai anyhow. So there's some historical basis for saying, hey, these guys have been copying Hollywood since the 20s, since the 30s. And he lobs a bigger word here, colonialism. Cultural colonialism trained Chinese filmmakers to follow Hollywood aesthetics and traditions. Now, he'll say, Jiejin's so talented he overcomes that a little bit, but here he's lobbying the criticism of colonialism, saying that these movies are not really Chinese. They're being dominated by the American empire, and if you were, the equivalent to criticizing Steven Spielberg in the 80s would be for, like an op-ed to come out in the Wall Street Journal that says Steven Spielberg's movies are un-American. He is making movies that are, they're following a Russian model and a Chinese model. They're not really American movies. So yeah, this is some serious criticism that's being labeled, dropped in here. Okay, let's go a little bit further. What's the problem with having a clear morality of, good guys and bad guys? Well, emotional manipulation is how Daka describes it. He talks about the magnification of emotions. It's stirring up stronger emotions. I hear the echo of Plato's criticism in here that the poets are appealing to the desires and the passions too much, the magnification of emotion. And it's manipulating the audience to accept the conventional morality of the artist. So the audience is not thinking for themselves, which moral ambiguity does this. They don't, in a morally ambiguous movie, you don't know who's right and wrong. You have to figure that out for yourself. Whereas if the movie already has a clear morality, you as the viewer are just accepting that. You're supposed to feel what the main character feels, and the message that you're getting through your emotions is whatever the director wants. You're just doing what the director tells you. um, not quite brainwashing, but along that line. All of these messages are being set by the filmmakers. And what would be better would be independent consciousness, where people think for themselves, subjectivity, the reason that Plato talks about, but the independence and subjectivity, these are more romantic themes about individualism, connected to political reform, rationalism of science. And so I love this connection to the Confucian tradition that Judaka makes. And he says, Jie Jin's films, what the model is a cinematic ruse school. So the ruse school, you may recall from the lecture on Confucius, Master Kong, is the name of his school. The ruse school is Confucius. So ruse school just means tradition here. And so the symbol, what is this? Well, he's going to give you a great example here, which is his representation of women. They are amiable, kind, industrious, and intolerable. In a word, patriarchy. They follow the 3 obediences and the 4 virtues. They're self-sacrificing. Their characteristics, the accumulation of standard images of women from the old days, are nothing other than the products of a patriarchal culture. Rule of the father. Women do not get to be independent. There is no gender equality here in the Confucian tradition and in Jie Jin's movies. According to this criticism, women entirely dependent on men are used to discover and approve male values and to make men happy. Okay, this is not a modern tradition. Medieval family values is basically what he sees in here. That women are just serving men and supporting the family. The comfortable family of the Middle Ages is the highest stage of human happiness. Is there nothing more than just having a father with his wife and kids around him? Like, can we hope for nothing more in life than that? It's terrible if you're a woman. Not necessarily terrible, but terrible that you don't have a choice to do something else, or to lead the family on your own. So consequently, the destruction of the family is the ultimate tragedy. That the conflict in his movies, you can read into this, are centered around the family. Patriotism then is tied into serving the family. This all goes back to a tradition of the nation is this bigger family, and who is the father of the bigger family? The emperor, the nobles, and so forth. You have to know your place. Not so much freedom. You have to do what father says. Medieval family values. Okay, now, as he concludes, Judaka says he isn't saying that they're badly made movies. No, he says they're refined and popular. They can please everyone. But if you look beyond this broad, look at the films within a broader cultural context, they deviate far from the evolutionary processes of Chinese culture and a major retreat from the spirit of the May 4th movement. Okay, so to conclude, what kind of movies does Judaka like? If he doesn't like the moral fairy tales of Jie Jin and Hollywood, he likes art films. Art films would be the spirit of modernity, where you're going to have moral ambiguity. There's this, independent film, indie style stories here are independent in terms of independent consciousness, that the viewer has to think for themselves, that they don't totally forget that they're watching a movie. It's into the rational side of things.